today? Good, good. How's everything going? Good.
It's always nice to see you guys.
Good evening and welcome to the Branford Board of Education's Personnel and Finance Committee meeting of February 21st, 2018. Normally, these are pretty brief meetings, but tonight we have a number of items, and so it is going to take a little bit longer than usual. We want to make everyone aware that after the board has had a chance to discuss the budget, there will be time for input from the audience. So please be aware that at that time we'll ask for your input. We start off with our approval of minutes of the January 10th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Our discussion items tonight start with our 2017 monthly, 2017-2018 monthly expenditures. Don Neal, our Chief Operating Officer, will discuss those.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. As you can see from your budget status reports, the general operations budget is 85% committed. The special education budget is 82.3% committed for a consolidated commitment of 84.5%. We're in fine shape this year, but there is one item that I would like to highlight, and that's Character Code 81 subsidy, and that's the amount that we have to contribute to the food service program because it's been a subsidy program for many years. It loses money, and we're required out of our general fund budget to make up the deficit. As you can see in the expended column, which has been there for a couple of months, a negative amount, and that negative $15,000 is a voluntary contribution made by Chartwells, although they didn't give me a specific reason why they chose to do that. It stands to reason that they were doing that in some way to compensate for their underperformance on their contract last year. But nevertheless, they are also on track again to, the program's on track to lose significantly more money than their guaranteed minimum loss. So our contract guarantees us that they will only lose so much money. Beyond that, they have some money at risk. Beyond that, we're back at risk. The contract guaranteed loss this year is $83,634. As I was looking at this earlier in the year, it seemed to me that they were probably going to lose well in excess of $100. I had some voluntary assistance from the food service director from New Haven Schools, and she projects that the program will lose in the neighborhood of $160,000 to $170,000 this year. So from that, now that would be gross. From that, we would have to subtract the $15,000 they gave us, another $15,000 that they have at risk. So, and they've done a little better the last couple of months, but nonetheless, they're still on track to for us to have to contribute more than $100,000 to them, to the program as a subsidy. So it's 2 years of underperformance when they have significantly exceeded the amount of their guaranteed loss. I elected not to renew their contract for next year. We're in the second year of what could be a 5-year contract, but we have the option to non-renew. And even if I had not felt that was the right thing to do, the state has told us you will go out to bid again next year because they're very much aware of this situation. So be happy to answer any questions about that.
John?
So what was the amount of the guarantee? Is it $30,000?
So the guaranteed loss is for this year is 83.6 thousand.
No, the amount that we guarantee them, that there's some dollar amount that we say is part of the contractual arrangement. If you lose money, we'll cover up to some number.
Well, not actually. We're our downside risk, as they say, is kind of open-ended. If the more they lose, the more we have to contribute to subsidize the program.
So it's not a fixed number. Can you tell us if there's an assessment as to what's going on, number one, and number two, if the state's involved, does that mean that they're doing this in other districts as well, and they're kind of on the hook for bad performance?
Last week, I went to a presentation by the state of their new RFP document that we'll be using, and I was the only one there who was in this particular situation. So it's pretty extraordinary, I think, to have losses so far in excess of their contractual agreement. And to kind of put things in perspective, their guaranteed maximum loss last year was approximately $50,000. The program actually lost 127, minus their 15 that they're on the hook for. We paid 112. So they guaranteed we wouldn't lose more than 50, but we ended up losing out of pocket $112,000.
And Mayor, just one last question. Is there a way, oh, I didn't realize, I'm sorry. Is there a way to designate where that happens to occur? Is that administrative cost, or is that supply and operational cost?
Sure. They have, well, first I will say, somewhat in their defense, there are a couple logistical challenges that are beyond their control. So the serving area at Walsh is a challenge. It would be a challenge if we ran the program ourselves or for any contractor. Right. Also at the high school, only having 2 lunch waves is also something that makes it difficult to get the students through quickly and get served. And we recently had a student survey, and that was confirmed. The students are pretty well aware that getting their lunch in a timely manner is difficult, and some select other options than to buy school lunch. So I've compared our district to other similar districts, and our participation rate is significantly lower than other similar districts. We also, as part of that survey that we did recently, assessed student satisfaction. And kind of in general terms, I think it's would not be unfair to say that students are not particularly happy with the looks and the taste of the food. There are certain requirements of being participants in the National School Lunch Program that we have to follow, but still, that's if it's a problem for the students, it's a problem for us as the administration. And on top of that, the Chartwell's labor costs are well in excess of industry averages. They have shared with me that their bargaining agreement is it's restrictive and in some terms that creates some problems and relatively rich in benefits, again, compared to other surrounding similar contracts that they have.
Thank you.
Other questions? Are we going to be able to cover this loss within our budget, or do
Yes,
we
sir,
have
we
a
will.
major problem?
No, we will.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Yes,
You
Joanne?
probably covered it, but what was the date that we're not going to be renewing with them?
July 1st.
Oh, okay. So we have plenty of time to look for,
Yeah, I'm in the
Yeah, we're in
process
the process
of putting together a request for proposals.
oh, perfect,
And,
thank you.
yeah, we'll be going out to bid.
Right. Will we be doing the summer lunch program again this year?
Yes, we
Breakfast
will.
and lunch
That'll be-
program? Okay.
That's, makes it a little more challenging because of the timing of it,
Right,
but
that's what I'm
definitely
thinking, July 1st.
that's on my radar.
Yeah. Right. Okay, thank you. Charles, the special ed pupil service report?
The February 1st tuition and transportation snapshot is in your Google Drive. You will notice that there was a substantial change that occurred this month. Compared to January, we have a reduction in our tuition expenses of about $22,600. The projected tuition expenses are now estimated for on June 30th at about $2.25 million. With this change, we also have a related reduction in our transportation costs. That reduction sits around $32,500 compared to January. Our tuition and transportation expenses overall look to be approximately $2.9 million effective June 30th of 2018 against a $3 million budget. That's leaving us with a projected fund balance of around $81,000.
Very good.
This change was due to a census change and the loss of a tuition of a student who was no longer fiscally responsible through Branford.
And does that account for the transportation change also? Or?
It does.
It does,
Because we were
okay.
able to consolidate some transportation as a result of that.
Okay. Other questions for Charles? No. Okay, Don, we're back to you on the personnel report.
Okay, I don't have much to say about the report other than one correction. Ms. Ogren's effective date of retirement is listed as 7/1/18. It's at 6:30, of course.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments?
That's a loss.
That's a loss, yes.
Yeah.
That is.
John, did you guys have any input on the Chartwells or the food service or anything?
question.
Because you're there. Not to put you on the spot, but
I'm not gonna lie, I haven't bought school lunch in a very long time, and that's just something that I've chosen to do just because I enjoy bringing my own lunch, and I don't know if it's because I found the food like not up to standards, but I just decided to bring in my own lunch.
oh, good.
Yeah, I'm also on that bring your own lunch kind of thing. I've been doing that since second grade, so I haven't had a school lunch in a while. But from the looks of it, it looks like it's getting better. Like the food definitely looks like it's improving in quality. But there was a little bit of time where it was like not so great. But it looks better now. That's what we've got.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal had mentioned there's only 2 lunch waves, and time might be an issue getting your lunch. And do you see that at all? Are there long lines to get lunch, or?
Yeah, there are definitely long lines.
There are.
And that's might just be because there's only 2 locations at which you can get lunch. There's like a sandwich cart, and then there's a cave almost of food. But if there were more, I'm sure the lines would be less. But there's only 2 spots and a lot of kids in 2 waves to serve.
That's what I'm asking, is there enough time to stand in line, get your lunch, and then eat it in a normally amount of time?
Yeah, I would say so.
There is, okay. Very good. Any other questions? All right. If not, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the calendar amendment for this school year. And I'm going to turn this over to Hamlet to explain that.
Thank you, John. I just want to make sure that I have the right calendar because the next agenda item is also a calendar issue. As you know, we have, where's my date on that? Currently, the school district is scheduled to attend school on Good Friday, which takes place, I want to say, on March 30th of this year. That was a day that the board had chosen for us to be in attendance as part of a comprehensive approach to be able to get out of school as early as possible for the construction. Our collective bargaining agreement with the BEA permits for religious holidays, and what we have now is we have in excess of 60 requests, I believe.
I think we're in excess of 80.
Now it's 80, so the last time I checked, it was 60, now it's 80. And that tends, we've reached a tipping point where we would not be able to appropriately staff the schools. Kelly Services, the fill rate for that day would be very, very questionable, so I'm making a recommendation to the board, and this is a follow-up to the conversation that we had as a board, where the board tasked me to look at different options. I worked with the BEA. I don't know if Sarah, I see Sarah in the audience. Sarah she had canvassed her members, as well as I canvassed the administrators, and collectively, we all pretty much landed at the same piece, which is this is probably an untenable situation for us, and the recommendation would be to not have school on that particular day, and then to add that to the end of the school year, so that it would not be added to the April vacation or taken from the April vacation, which essentially would put us at the end of, I should say, the last day being the 7th of June, pending no additional cancellations for whatever reason. And again, I would emphasize that this was a decision that was made with very, very good intentions, and also with very much equity and fairness and respect towards the religious holidays. But what we have really is an issue that we did not necessarily foresee, which was so many people exercising their right, contractual right, of a religious holiday, which really, when you think about in excess of 80, we have about 280 teachers throughout the district. And we simply, between Kelly and other resources, we would not be able to cover it. And,
Okay.
so we wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Okay. Would you need a recommendation from this committee to the full board for the meeting next Wednesday?
Yes, that would be very, very helpful.
Okay. Would someone be willing to make the motion to the full board that we have this as a non-school day for this school year?
Sure. I'll make a
Okay.
motion.
Motion's been made. Seconded?
Second.
Second? Okay. Any discussion? John?
So I appreciate and understand that we talked about this in the context of time for the construction project, but I was also under the impression that we had a conversation about this with respect to religious equity, religious parity in the district, and so I'm disappointed that it has become an economic issue. I understand it. I still think that we need to address this from the standpoint of not favoring any given religion. May not be a popular position, but a recommendation, and it certainly obviously won't be for this year, it might be a way around it, and I haven't given this a lot of thought, so this is really coming off the top of my head, would be to make whatever our spring break is, be sure to incorporate the Good Friday or any other religion, if there's a way that we can build it into a break, so that it's clear that, because as we become more and more diverse, and I'm hoping that happens to be the case, there's an innumerable variety of religious holidays and vacations that we would have to figure out a way to respect. And I just hope we don't end up there. So I just thought it was important to make that point. And I understand that economically it would probably be a huge hit.
Thank you, John. I agree with you. Yeah. The motion, though, is on the floor. Any other comments before we take a vote? Okay, those in favor of the motion? Aye.
That's committee members. by the way.
Committee members, yes. Those opposed? Okay, we will recommend to the full board for their meeting on Wednesday that day be a non-school day. Now for the school year calendar of 2018, 2019. Again, I'll turn it over to Hamlet.
Thank you, John. The board has two options for their consideration, option 1 and option 2. The options really differ and really on only one day, which is March 13th. When you look at the calendars on March 13th, option 1 has the 13th as being an early release day, which means essentially it is a student day. March 13th, and option 2 is a no school day but a PD day for staff. The impact of that is essentially that we would have the last day of school in option number 2 as June 11th, barring no school days or no cancellations, and that would be the last day for both students and staff. Option 1, essentially, we would have the last day of school for students on the 10th, but the last day for staff would be on the 11th. The board had asked and directed me to look at developing different calendar options with the caveat of starting after Labor Day, and that was confirmed with working group and the working team on the construction project that we would want to maximize the summer and start after Labor Day. And the board also asked me to work with the BEA, which we did, as well as the Administrators Union, which we did. And what you see here is really is representative of the different options that were designed, and they were really narrowed down to the 13th. And to your point, Mr. Prinz, the spring break does incorporate one of those holidays. So the Good Friday issue is not an issue next year. So that is incorporated in the April vacation. And on the Jewish holidays, originally we had contemplated having a half day on the 19th, but when we recognized that that was a Jewish holiday, we did not do that. It's essentially a full day. We didn't want to necessarily.
I'm sorry, which day?
I believe September 19th is one of the Jewish high holidays, and we are in school that day. But in sensitivity to teachers, we did not feel as if that should be a staff development day, because many teachers would want to exercise their religious leave so that they would not have to miss out on a PD.
Good.
So that was in deference to those teachers of the religious faith.
Do we have any questions on the calendar? What is your wish? Do you want to have time to look it over before next Wednesday, or do you want to make a recommendation on option 1 or option 2 tonight to the full board?
Yeah, I would ask. I would ask if the superintendent has a recommendation on either one of these.
Well, probably much to, I feel like I'm in the hot seat today, just for the record, but much to perhaps some folks who would like to get out at the same day as the children. I think it's important for staff to return the day after students have left, simply because there is a certain amount of closure that takes place in classrooms as well as just administratively. And I know that being a teacher myself, that sometimes at the end of the year, we can get caught up in the excitement of that, and we would not want to start closure activities prematurely, and just having that day to return after the students. So my recommendation would be option 1, with the caveat also that we have no snow days, but I don't control that. I just call them, but I don't control the weather. So that would be the recommendation.
Okay, option number 1. Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
For
All right.
option 1?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for option 1.
Second to that motion? Okay, our recommendation to the board would be option number 1. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. And now we move on to the item for this next school year, the education budget and the capital budget. And again, before we have our discussion, I want to turn it over to Hamlet to kind of review where we are in the process and give us some more information about the capital budget. Thank you, guys.
Can I ask a preliminary question? I don't think we have new documents in our folders, do we? There's nothing under this item in Google Drive.
Not aware
That
of
is
it.
correct.
It's whatever we got beforehand.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Did everyone hear? I just want to make sure from the board's perspective that these are, Jim, would you mind, these are some extra handouts just in case somebody in the public is interested in, this is what was presented last week. It's, and I apologize, Mr. O'Connor, I just want to take a second
That's
to
all right.
get myself organized.
And again, I want to remind anyone here that after the board has their discussion, you'll have an opportunity for comments on the budget.
So to pick up on Mr. Prinz's question, the board has two documents. They have the presentation from last week as well as the working booklet for the budget that board members receive that we will discuss today in greater detail. Just as a recap, the superintendent's recommended budget calls for a 1.95 increase, or an additional $1,088,837 over the current year. And that brings the recommended request to $56,888,223. And this evening, with Mr. Neal's assistance, we will certainly first answer the questions that were provided by the board through Mr. O'Connor. We have responses to those questions. The board was asked if they had any questions regarding the budget to vet those through Mr. O'Connor so that we would be responsive this evening. If there are additional questions and we're able to answer them because we have the information in front of us this evening, certainly we'll do that. If not, we have between now and next week to be able to provide those responses. We'll start off this evening by Mr. Neal addressing those questions, and then we'll quickly turn our attention to page 16, just as a starting point in your working document, because page 16 has all of the characters, that object codes, so that you can see on that page where the changes are, what part of the budget, the percentage of the budget, and then if you have any additional questions relative to what you've been reviewing for the last week, we're happy to answer those, or if we don't have an answer, we're happy to, get right back to you as quickly as possible. So with that, I turn it over to Don, so Don can provide the responses to the questions that we've had.
Thank you, Hamlet. I believe the first questions were from Ms. Earhart. What's the approximate cost of the board for unemployment for each teacher that is let go? And I like to contextualize that. Just because a position is reduced doesn't necessarily mean that a
Don, I want
teacher's
to
going to
correct,
lose.
that was one of my questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right.
Perhaps I'm misreading it. At any rate, the maximum exposure for us for any employee, but teachers fall into that range where they would hit the max, is approximately $16,000. It's 26 weeks of coverage. If they have dependents, up to 5 dependents, that amount can be increased by another $2,000. So that's the answer to that
Thank
question. In practice, we certainly hope that teachers get another job somewhere else, and that frequently is the case. So that happens. What do Branford teacher retirees pay to stay in the school's health insurance? We don't have precise rates for next year. We don't have the allocated rates, but currently for single, it's $10,870. For two-person coverage, it's $21,740. And for family coverage, it's $29,375. Third question was number of active certified teachers in Branford between the ages of 59 and 64, and current count is 26. Fall into that category.
Would you mind just repeating that? I didn't hear the category.
Teachers that are aged 59 to 64, and the 26. We have 26 certified staff. I apologize. These must be your questions. Can we determine the total cost of the workshop model, inclusive of coaches, PD, and other resources? Coaching, I don't believe, is actually a component of the workshop model, but the main cost that we have is we have a contract with Teachers College, and last year we paid $58,500 to Teachers College to provide that PD. There was a question about the graph of FTEs on the presentation, whether that included administrative FTEs. No, it didn't. That was just teachers. Of course, the administrative FTEs have been relatively stable, so if we added those, the graph would look similar, but it just at a higher number. What is the, excuse me, what is the 2.0 increase being requested for classified staff and the 1.5 increase in security? I believe that 2.0 is in the other category, and there are two positions there. One is a technology position that, quite frankly, we missed when we were budgeting last year. And the other one, I believe Mr. Hernandez mentioned this during his presentation. There was a reallocation of one certified position, which was the athletic trainer, from certified to non-certified, which is a more appropriate classification. So that's not an additional position; it's just a reallocation. And then the other half of the question was the 1.5 FTE increase in security, and we had with the building project going to be in full swing next year. We want to make sure that the students are well supervised as they transfer between classes at Walsh. So there's a position that will be assigned to Walsh, and the other 0.5 is a position that we intend to add to Indian Neck, a cost that will be shared with the Family Resource Center. So they're probably be a full-time position, but only half of it coming out of our budget.
Ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you talk some more about that? I'm not sure I follow what all that translates into, the security positions.
I'll be happy to talk about that.
That'd be great.
The additional security, right now, Walsh Intermediate School has one security personnel. That individual has been there now for the better part, I believe this is year 2. We anticipate students entering differently, the parent drop-off being at a different location. We also anticipate that we'll have construction workers on site, and that we need to ensure that we have a heightened sense of supervision for when students are moving and when parents are coming into the building. And this would provide another set of eyes as well as additional supervision and really direction. Our current security guard has worked out exceedingly well at the intermediate school. He's developed relationships with kids, with staff, with parents, and we hope to replicate that model, particularly when we anticipate not only next year but the following year, where we'll have students actually having to potentially exit the building to access other parts of the building, i.e. the gym and the locker room. So we want to have a heightened sense of security, and that's the reason why we're making that request. And as far as Indian Neck, John, that's where we have our youngest children. We have our students that are coming out of birth to 3 that are identified, and we have an FRC preschool there, as well as our preschool from the district for typicals and atypical students. That school is somewhat in I'm not going to say isolated area, but it's a little bit off the beaten path. They do have a buzz-in system, but again, in this day and age, we feel as if it's a good resource to have an additional presence there, so that we ensure that there's a lot of traffic. Parents, there's a half-day program, parents are coming in and out, that we are ensuring that we're doing everything that we can to provide the safest environment that we can for our students.
How are they identified? I mean, what do they look like?
They actually wear Branford Public Schools shirts that say security.
Thank you.
So that they are easily identifiable.
Okay, thank you.
You know.
So additional information was asked about the $112,000 increase in site licenses, and those are course software licenses. It's been our practice whenever practicable to buy multi-year licenses if the software manufacturer provides a deep discount, and we had a couple of those that are coming on cycle this year. So it's kind of a cyclical thing. Ms. Mingron here is, she could answer if you have additional questions, but that's kind of the basic element.
Okay. Board members, additional questions?
I do. I
Yes.
misunderstood. I didn't send you my questions.
No,
So
that's fine.
if you need time to answer them, I understand that. So I have some questions about the coaching model, and thinking about the pretty large number of coaches we have in the district. I guess this is more of a Hamlet question than a Don question, but how are we looking at the coaching model and evaluating its worth or evaluating if it is working in the district on a consistent basis? How are we looking at that group of people that are coaching and deciding if it's having a positive impact on our students, on our test scores, on our teachers?
Well, certainly, we see that the coaching model, as I said during the presentation, is still in its infancy. It's in year 3. When you consider implementing a high leverage professional development and professional growth model, it takes a period of time to start making that shift. I believe that we are already, not that I believe, we are already seeing the results of teachers that have embraced the coaching model and have gone through a coaching cycle with a coach. Their students on our internal assessment, STAR, we're seeing growth in those areas. So that's certainly one area that we can point to, and that is to our internal assessments. Another piece that we can turn to is when teachers are having conversations with administrators around how they are changing their practice and feeling supported. I would be remiss to say, if I didn't say that I don't believe that we are 100% fully there as a district. I think at any given time, something of this magnitude and a shift like this in practice takes time. And matter of fact, I spoke to both Jim and to Sarah. I think that clearly both of our professional education organizations see that we still have room to improve. And room to improve meaning, we have a pretty clear vision for coaching, but the implementation of that and really people embracing that is still ongoing. But clearly the ones that have, we see results.
You mentioned in your budget discussion last week that science was going to be a real focus for next year. Are you planning on adding science coaches with this budget?
No, actually, there is no, this budget, there is no plan in this budget to add additional coaches at this point. We do have, I want to be clear though, we do have a science coach at the high school.
Right, yes, I know.
Okay. And at Walsh, I'm sorry, and at Walsh, yep.
Okay. And I have one last question. This is going to be a Charles question, probably. I don't know if he heard me.
No.
There you
He's
go.
back there.
Okay. Charles, can you talk to me a little bit about the, looking at the salaries, and can you tell me about approximately how many transition students you have right now? Or actually for next year? Students in the transition program.
This year, approximately 10.
Okay.
Next year, our number will sit around that amount.
Okay.
What we don't know is a firm number. Because some students might be
Sure.
eligible and choose not to participate.
Sure.
Others, they don't know they're eligible yet, but we do, and we're trying to convince, so.
Okay. I'm not done. Hold on. Don't go anywhere. You might well sit. So I think as an educator and a parent, when I hear that districts are going to cut teachers, it concerns me, because I always think that we can find some place for a teacher to be. I'm concerned about the ratio of coaches versus teachers, losing classroom teachers. I'm also concerned about having administrators where we could have teachers. In particular, a transition coordinator for 10 children concerns me a little bit. It maybe it shouldn't, but if you could tell, and I know this doesn't sound like it's budget related, but it is in my own little twisted way. If you could explain to me the role and the certification of the transition coordinator.
Okay. Well, let's start, it is not a transition coordinator.
Okay.
It is a non-administrative position.
Okay.
It is a teacher whose assignment is that of a transition specialist in our district. Her certification is an 065, which is comprehensive special education.
Yep.
Her role was born out of a need. It was born out of the need for more students to get more quality transition services. She has a very complex role. Her role involves working with staff directly on creating IEPs and services for kids who need that transition level.
Okay.
She works with kids directly, one-on-one and in small groups. She's a liaison to our State Department relative to transition requirements. She has first name basis with people like Dr. Pat Anderson, who recently retired, unfortunately, Missy Rakely, all these folks on a first name basis. So she's a great consultant to the state. She's a part of the state practice consortium on transition, so she helps to guide practice at the state level. Internally, she acts as a tutor. She goes to out-of-district schools when we're transitioning students back into district, who are at the high school level in particular, to help really line them up with the right coursework. She helps conduct person-centered planning, which really involves looking at a kid from a 360-degree viewpoint, involving the family, the school, anybody who knows that student, including friends that that kid might choose, and really doing a deep analysis of where that kid is, where that kid wants to be, and building a path to get there with the right coursework and services. So it's a complex role. It's not defined by any one job description. I'll refuse to go down that path because it's an evolving role, and it's always, okay.
I definitely understand that.
So it's a teacher who works with students, works with staff, works at the board level and the state level.
Okay. Wow. I think my concern there is that being in my own special ed meetings, one of the things that we had to deal with was being cited by the state for being non-compliant in our own transition program. How are you in that situation?
That was, the State Department of Education conducted an audit of all districts in Connecticut. The majority of them were found out of compliance. We were found out of compliance on 2 check boxes out of 25 IEPs, each having 755 potential compliance issues at any one point in time.
Okay.
A box wasn't checked.
Yep.
This was the State Department of Education's method to get into every district and change our practices, knowing where the federal guidelines were going to be headed in a few years. That's how they work.
Yep. Okay. And that's
and we've been in our corrective action right now.
Consistent with what I've seen.
We're in our corrective action stage right now. We did our analysis. We had our professional development with the State Department, and we're really in front of where we need to be.
Good.
Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
And I have one last question too. If we have coaches in each building, let me just back up there. How many math coaches and ELA coaches do we have in each elementary school building?
We have 2 language art coaches in each elementary and 1 math coach in each elementary school.
So if we have those coaches, do we have a need for people like Andy Ducis and Allison Zamuda continuing to work with our coaches and our curriculum people if we have all those people in place?
I would say no if they were doing the same work, but they're not.
Okay.
They're doing distinctly different work. Allison Zamuda is working on developing and doing our work with curriculum. She's worked through the ELA and as well as math, and now she's helping us with our science. So she's a jump-off point, and then we have our curriculum committee. So she's provided that assistance. And then when it comes to Andy Duis, Andy has been in our district for a period of time. His work has shifted really to beginning teachers. As we know, beginning teachers
there's definitely a need for that.
Need support, particularly in the area of classroom management. So that's a resource that we use, and we also use Andy to established common language that we use with our students. And it started at the elementary level and has worked its way through the intermediate as well as the high school.
Okay.
And as a result of that, we have seen a decrease in student behaviors, which I've reported to the
Yep.
to the board over the years.
Going back to that now, I'm assuming that Allison Zamuda, being a big name in education, we have 2 full-time curriculum people making approximately $125,000, $130,000, 2 of them. But they still need Allison Zamuda to work with them?
I would say that Allison, well, to answer your question directly, the answer is yes, because we still contract with her.
Okay.
Because we still believe that there's a need to do that. Keeping in mind that our curriculum coordinators, that is a position that is very, very comprehensive. And they are not, our curriculum coordinators are working with teachers, and they're working with administrators. Allison is someone who is helping us to reimagine some of our curriculum pieces. And I do believe that we see the impact. There's a reason why our 3 elementary schools have been cited as schools of distinction in the last 2 years. I think we're making very significant and steady gains.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, John?
Yeah, Charles, I don't know if others don't know. I'm not sure that I do know when we talk about the transition piece. That implies that they're going from one place to another. Could you tell us what that looks like?
There's a couple transition piece that involves multiple steps.
Wait until you get to them.
I get excited by this. The transition in the broad sense has multiple arms to it. Transition from an Individuals with Disabilities Education Act perspective is when a student turns 16 years of age, you have to begin to plan for post-secondary life. That's one piece of the transition. The other part that I started to talk about was we have students who are often going back and forth, particularly at the high school level.
Back and forth from where to where?
From out-of-district schools.
Thank you.
Back into Branford, who really need a hand to provide guidance to them, who gets to know their cases, who can help build kind of that bridge of support between all these different buildings. This individual also covers that physical transition.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Marie?
Do you anticipate the increases in the site licenses to continue? Or, I heard that it was cyclical. How do you see that,
Well, it's.
that item?
I would defer to Donna, but I do know that we have to be very, very careful relative to open source pieces that we can avail ourselves. Because it's free doesn't necessarily mean that we can avail ourselves to that. Site licenses, clearly, as a district, we needed to right-size that. Donna helped us with that. We were clearly out of compliance because we weren't paying for our site licenses. So the question is, Donna, do we anticipate that being a recurring expense that's increasing?
We've been trying to smooth things out as much as possible. A number of products were purchased on multi-year licensing prior to my arrival, and so those are now due. The way I build my budget is I have a line for every single piece of software we have, and whether there's a dollar amount attached that year or not. This happens to be a year where we have a few of them coming up. For example, in the budget, I put 1 year of Microsoft licensing because that's $30,000 just for the 1 year. Previously, we had a 3-year license, so there was a large expenditure of money, but you do get the discount, more of a discount. So we are trying to smooth it out so that it's going to be a year to year. But again, it's very compelling to have an opportunity to save 10 to 30% if we buy multiple years.
And on the site license line, is that inclusive of digital texts?
Yes, when we purchase, for instance, Bridges and Envisions,
Right.
that's part of that.
Yes. I've incorporated all the licensing for the entire district, operating a curriculum for every department this year, including the library software and including even the specialized software that's used in the special high school programs.
So is it is it of your opinion that we would see this 25, 26 plus increase on an annual basis?
No.
Or is this
No.
just sort of that
I think this is
anomaly
a
where
year that
we
a couple
have-
of the bigger ones are hitting.
Okay.
And again, 2 or 3 of them were spec'd that we would do a 2-year license. You know, if the budget was cut, we could cut to a 1-year license, but we'd lose the opportunity to save money. So it's a balancing act. I always try to save and negotiate as much of a possible savings as I can.
Is there a way for us to see what licenses are up for renewal at what years?
Actually, my department, we've created a spreadsheet with
I think that would
everything.
be nice to see, to anticipate.
Other questions? Don?
I owe you an answer to one additional question, and that was the increase in purchase services, and that can be traced almost entirely to substitutes. When I create the substitute budget, I look at what we spent last year, and I also look at our trajectory with our year-to-date, which, when we put the budget together, was December. And particularly on the special ed substitutes, we were way over budget last year. We increased the budget this year, but we're still sort of headed towards an expenditure in this year. So I attempted to compensate for that.
Okay, thank you, Don. Other questions?
Thank you.
John?
So on that substitute line, I was curious to know, before this committee made a recommendation to change Good Friday back to an in-school day or an out-of-school day, where did those numbers fall? Were they included? Did you budget?
I had not taken that into
Okay.
consideration, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments? If not, I have a comment on an impact that I am concerned about with the budget, and I hope we can come up with a way of addressing it so that it ends up being a positive rather than a negative. And that is that in this budget, there is a reduction of 7 certified staff positions. There are human beings in those positions whose positions will be eliminated. These cuts are justified by the enrollment decline. There's no way we can look at it any other way. If enrollment is declining, we need less staff, and there is a need to make cuts. But how can we do it without hurting human beings? No matter how we justify it, whether we justify it or not, these reductions are going to cause problems throughout the staff. The 7 that end up losing their jobs are probably not going to be the 7 that are in the positions presently that will be cut, and we don't know where those cuts are coming yet and probably won't know for some time. The reason that it's 7 different people that will actually lose their jobs than the 7 that are presently in the positions that are cut is that the Branford teacher's contract, like most teachers' contracts, has a clause that says no tenured teacher will be released while non-tenured teachers are retained in their position or in a position for which a tenured teacher is qualified. So if a 5th grade teacher position is cut and that 5th grade teacher happens to have been here for 20 years, they can bump a teacher in another area that has the same certification, and the teacher with the lowest amount of time in Branford, the non-tenured teacher, will be the one to lose their job. This concerns me for a lot of reasons. Number one, this is my 5th year on the board, and I've been so impressed with the hires that have been made in this school system over the last 5 years. They're extraordinary. And I don't think we want to lose any of those non-tenured teachers. Those teachers that were hired in the last 4 years are still not tenured and would be the ones to lose their positions or lose jobs. The other concern I have is that we have 55% of our teachers are on the top step. That means they've probably been here over 20 years in Branford. And many of them I know we hope will stay for many more years, and many of them hope to stay for many more years. But there are a few who are over the age of 60, who have qualified for full retirement, that might like to retire at this point, but can't because of one reason, and that is insurance. When a teacher retires from Branford, they are eligible to stay under the town's insurance, and most do, but they have to pay every penny of it. And as Mr. Neal pointed out, for a single teacher, that means paying $11,000 next year, or $10,700. For a couple, that's $21,700, and for a family, that's $29,300. Now, you might think there aren't too many teachers that are in their 60s that are under family coverage, but if you had your child at age 38 and you're under the coverage now till age 26 for a child till age 64, that child could be under your coverage. This is probably more than half of the retirement they're going to get just to buy insurance. So for some teachers, and not, again, I don't want to say all teachers would want to take an early retirement if insurance was taken away, but there are a few, I'm sure, who are ready. They've done their 30 or 35 years, and they're over the age of 60, which is the age you have to reach to have a no-penalty retirement in Connecticut. And I would like us to find a way to offer our teachers possibly as much as 3 years in the health insurance at no cost to the Board of Education. And I'm sure if the meeting took place between the BEA and the central office, that this wouldn't be a difficult thing to do. And the reason I say that is because when a non-tenured teacher leaves, that's the lowest paid teacher, and if we do not find a spot for them in Branford, we're going to have to pay their unemployment compensation, which, as Mr. Neal pointed out, would be about $16,000 a year. So there's not going to be much savings for some of the teachers that are eliminated. However, if a top-step teacher voluntarily leaves, the difference in salary between a top-step teacher and a non-tenured teacher is about $35,000. That would mean an additional $35,000 worth of savings for the town, more than enough to cover the cost of insurance and possibly enough to cover any severance pay that they would be entitled to. So I would like the board and the central office and the BEA to work together to try and work out a plan so none of our non-tenured teachers actually lose a job. We eliminate the 7 positions, but no one actually doesn't have a job next year of these very qualified teachers. I think we need to act soon on this. I think it's easy to say, well, we can wait until the budget process runs its course. The budget process doesn't end until May when the RTM votes on the budget. We know we're eliminating 7 positions now, even though we don't know where they are yet. There's no reason we have to wait to make this offer and work out some kind of agreement with the BEA for an early retirement offer for our teachers. And I would like to see us pursue that as soon as possible so that we reduce the anxiety level amongst our teaching staff. We don't have one teacher suspicious of another teacher that might bump them or whatever in the process and just cause problems throughout the school system. So it's a comment I'm making. It's my own opinion. It's not anything the board is backed in any way at this point, but I would like it to be under consideration by the board, the central office, and the BEA. Okay. Are there other questions or comments?
No, but thank you, John, because I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%.
Thank you. Thank you. If not, we will vote on the superintendent's budget, a recommendation on the superintendent's budget, whether we are recommending it to the full board. This is not the capital budget, which we'll hear about in just a moment. I'm sorry, before I do that, I did say we would have comments. I'm sorry, comments from the public. Yes, yes, please come up and identify yourself.
Make sure the little green light is on, if you push it.
Okay. Hi, my name's Lisa. I have 2 kids at Walsh. I was looking through the budget priorities, and one of the things that's listed is to maintain a reasonable class size. So with the team consolidations at Walsh, my son currently has 26 students in some of his classes. This is a significant increase from last year, and while the teacher to student ratio is 1 to 26 in this scenario, those teachers are teaching 5 classes back to back. That makes the student to teacher ratio possibly 125 students to 1 teacher per day. Again, a significant increase over previous years. I'm concerned about the impact that this has had on daily operations. We're lucky to have fantastic teachers in Branford, and I'm wondering if conversations are occurring to really hear how this is going every day. and what's happening for next year? And what's considered a reasonable class size?
Thank you. Did you want to comment?
Sure.
on-
Thank you, Lisa, for those comments. And as you know, you and I spoke one day in the foyer at the intermediate school, and you had shared specifically in science. And I don't have it in front of me, but I do know that the highest class size, I believe, was 25 in one of the science classes, Anthony. And I don't read. It was an outlier in
because most of them were 20, 21, and then it was 26. So the average number of students, I would say it's true, that's 26. The average number of students that teachers see today is not accurate based on their calculation.
Okay.
But we are looking at it, and when we told you too, and Neil and I were really kind of doing an analysis of the class size at the middle school, and there were a couple, and I don't understand really why that they were outliers when it could have been. It seems like it could easily been adjusted so that class wasn't as large. But there were a couple of ones that were exceptions, and there were
Yeah.
ones that were 26. Two is those were the largest classes that we have.
But again, to have gone from the 3 teams to the 2 teams, you reduce the ability to separate students who have conflicts with one another. And I'm just wondering, really, how is this going for the teachers? Because I think that it does impact the connection that the students are able to make with the teachers. And I stress the fact that we have fantastic teachers in Branford. And I think that's the only reason that this has been at all successful. But I don't think the question is, can this be the way it is? I think the question should be, should this be the way it is? And when we're talking about cutting more staff positions, I'm just wondering, is this beneficial to our kids?
Sure, and that piece, Lisa, one of the things clearly that we are continuously looking at is the schedule, because as we prepare to move into the new middle school, the concept of a team, which is a middle school philosophy and approach, is very, very appropriate. And our teams are built with about 125, they're built for 125 students in that particular team. With five teachers on team. The 5th teacher could be a STEM teacher, could be a world language teacher. That is still in the works. But clearly the schedule piece, because we did have a schedule change this year, and we worked with the BEA on that schedule change. And we do know that it was a shift. So it is the first year, it is being looked at. And I anticipate that we'll make some tweaks to that schedule even next year, because really the goal is to have that really all hammered out before we move into the new middle school. And we actually talked about that this time last year. We talked about that piece.
Thank you.
In the middle school, have a committee.
Can I ask Anthony if, because many, many people are missing your response, if you could take a microphone, that would really be important.
And also with this schedule, is the board familiar with the 7th and 8th grade current schedule, that it's 5 back-to-back classes and that one of the classes is actually split in half for a lunch break, and then they go back to the class that they were in?
I can't speak.
It seems surprising for
I
some
can't-
people.
Yeah, and I can't speak for if the board knows. Typically, a Board of Education probably wouldn't know the detailed schedule of the school. I would find it surprising if they did.
Okay.
I'm being very, very honest with you. And as far as a period or a group of students having a split at times, that's not that uncommon, but I will tell you, it's not desirable. So if we can rectify that, it's certainly
Yeah.
something that we would want to rectify.
That, like, again, it kind of, my point is, are the teachers, are you guys checking in with the teachers to see how this is going?
We have a committee of teachers that are at the intermediate school, scheduling committee.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So-
I just met with them, I think a week ago, to really review their recommendations for the schedule. I mean, and they're controlling the schedule, to be quite frank. I mean, there's some things that, we need to review and discuss, but largely, their recommendations are being implemented. Where a couple of things, like I said, we had to discuss and look at a little bit further because of the impact. But we're definitely, supportive of a lot of the changes that have been recommended. And so, yeah, we're really talking with everyone possible to try to make the best decisions for our kids and have the best schedule possible.
Okay. Well, thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for
Lisa.
your time.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. Other comments? Please come forward. Yeah.
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
I have a couple of questions. One is, and I'm sorry I missed your presentation the original presentation, but I was wondering, the state and federal grants that we normally get. I know I heard a lot about the education cost sharing being reduced. There were impacts at state level. There were subsidies and other things for the construction, the loan and the principal, things like that. What is the impact of that, and is that considered in this budget?
Mm-hmm.
That's one question. The other question is, when we are under construction at the middle school, is there a pot for contingency costs for closures or delays or other things that if the students need to be relocated or additional equipment is necessary, or we need to do some temporary positioning of children or teachers? Is there a contingency for that scenario within this budget for next year? And then we mentioned there were 10 teachers between the ages of 59 and 64, so that's...
No, 26.
Oh, 26 within 5 years of retiring. And so it goes back to John's proposal to consider how we work with that population to help us maybe be more sensible about what positions are cut or how people are replaced or not replaced. And then I wanted to, as we have to cut costs and due to student enrollment being lowered, there's an impact to families. I know we're very conscientious about the impact of the construction at the middle school, but as Lisa was explaining, the number of students and the added work that families have to do, I think, I don't know that has a direct impact on the school budget, but I think that as we make cuts and as we make decisions, we keep cognizant of what that means for families. If we are going to have more students per class, that means added burden for homework. That means, again, my broken record, what are we putting online? What are we putting on paper? How are families going to have to accommodate any changes that are coming through that will impact instruction? And I think that was it.
Okay. Well, Celia, let me make sure that I heard your questions correctly. The first one was any change to federal and state aid. The second one was, are there any contingencies in the construction budget for the unexpected? The third being consideration for what's commonly referred to a reduction in force and how that would be done. And the fourth one was, is the district contemplating or does the district consider the impact to changes as it would manifest in families? I want to make sure that I heard those correctly. So on the first one, federal and state aid, the title grants that we have received are pretty much flat year over year. They continue to be flat. State aid, as you know and may not know, Branford was adversely impacted. The educational cost sharing was set back to the levels that we had received about 3 years ago. It is important, though, to remember that about 3 years ago was the time that we had a significant jump. We went from under 100,000 to approximately 200,000. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it was the year that we had a big jump. But we have since gone back. It's been regressed. It's been a regressive piece with ECS. And it's somewhat sad to say that I'm happy that that's what we did get, because some communities were actually zeroed out. So we're very fortunate in that regard. because the state financial crisis continues. Regarding contingencies, Celia, as you know from being an architect, anytime that you do a project of this magnitude, there are different contingencies that are held. The owner's contingency, the construction company's contingency. So are those funds accessible? Yes, and those funds are controlled not by this body. Those funds are controlled by the building commission. And should something occur unexpectedly in the project, that's precisely what those contingencies are there for, to access. So they are there. And then a reduction in force, we absolutely consider very, very carefully how best and the machinations of a reduction in force. It has to do with retirements, people that have declared their retirement, people that move, resign, people that take leaves of absence. So staffing will not be settled until, like John said, May, but it does not prevent us from considering and looking at different options potentially to offer for a select identified demographic of our staff. It does not prevent us from doing that. And then lastly, when it comes to parents, the handout that I had last week for the presentation, I believe the largest number of students that we have in a cohort anticipated for grade next year is under 250 at the intermediate school. But I want to double check that.
234.
Yes. 234. There's a lot of numbers in my head, so I want to make sure. That number, again, what we are proposing in the right sizing would it have an impact? Yes, it would have an impact, but the degree of the impact is rather minor. I think Lisa's point is more the major point is the scheduling piece, which I think we are looking at very, very proactively with teachers to see, okay, how do we do that? We've transitioned to a schedule that's team-based, but if we need to make further modifications, let's get the feedback from this year and let's look at that. So I think that's an important piece. So clearly, we are sensitive to that because that does have an impact, but there are also some real benefits for a parent to have a team of teachers, and that team of teachers knows that child very, very well. There's some real benefits to that. So I hope that answers your questions. I wish you had told me last night so I could have prepared, but you'd like to catch me. And so.
Are there other questions from the audience? Okay, John has another question.
So this isn't a question, it's a comment. We've worked really hard over the years to paint a picture that a reduction in enrollment does not automatically translate to the need for fewer dollars. That may not be the case this year. I mean, I understand that there comes a time when enrollment will have a direct impact, but it's never as simple as, oh my goodness, all our second grade children have been reduced by a full class, so we don't need a teacher. It never works out that way. And I just wanted to make that point so people don't have that misconception.
I think it's, I'm sorry.
No, go finish, because I have something totally different.
I think it's very, very important to be mindful of the presentation last week that 4 out of 10 students in our district are classified as having high needs by the state. And a well-supported teacher that is supported not only in their professional growth, but administratively from a supervision standpoint, quality evaluations, professional development, working with colleagues, that truly does yield better outcomes for children. And we see that. We see that as, when you asked me that question, Shannon, there's a direct correlation for teachers that are going through a coaching cycle and the performance of their students on STAR. We see that. Could there be other factors? Absolutely, there could be other factors. We're not saying it's a one-to-one correlation, but we see that. So to John's point, we have worked very, very hard, and I think our community has been, the RTM and the Board of Finance have been very, very supportive of moving away from it's a long division problem. It's not. It's more like an algebra problem, solving for X, and that's support. So I think we need to be very mindful of that.
Are there questions? Go,
It's
Shannon?
not a question necessarily. Coming from a board member, you don't often hear about adding something to the budget. You usually hear about taking things out of the budget. But one of the things I'd like the board and the administration to think about or consider putting into next year's budget, putting monies in for next year's budget, is a comprehensive emergency response training for classroom teachers and administrators, such as the ALICE program that is used in other surrounding districts. I know that Guilford, I believe, is in the process of having their teachers trained. Their administrators were trained yesterday. Hamden, Ansonia. Speaking as a classroom teacher, it's no matter how much training you have, when you hear that come over the announcements, even if you know it's a planned lockdown, a planned fire drill, the panic that goes through your body, knowing that you are responsible for 22, 24, 26 kids, is terrifying. I remember when I was a very young teacher starting out, I was 21 when I first started teaching, we had basic fire alarms. And I felt like I was gonna cry. You're the adult, you cannot cry during a fire drill. Now, a fire drill, I'm like, oh, I can do this, fire drill's great. But anything else really brings absolute sheer panic. I have no idea how I would react if a situation became an active shooting situation or any kind of terrible situation. I would like us to think about providing our teachers with the absolute highest quality training that we could possibly offer them, so we know that they feel comfortable taking care of our children. They're the first one. Obviously, our first concern is always our children, but these are adults that are asking for and need that kind of training that's out there. I have absolutely no idea the cost that goes into something like this. It could be something that our police department, our fire department could come together. Again, I have no idea, and I'm not speaking for anybody. But I think that piggybacking off of what the lady said earlier, if we could take a look at something that's comprehensive, that's proven, I think, to be effective, and really be proactive and be ahead of the game with this, and know that for our teachers to know and feel confident thinking about, all right, in this situation, I know exactly what I need to do. I know exactly where everything is, what I need to do. In my own building, in my own district, people in my building say, well, you're trained. Yeah, I'm trained to lock a door and hide in a corner. It's not trained to do anything. And it's scary because after things that happen, every time a situation like Florida is in the news, a teacher will lay in bed at night thinking, okay, what would I do if? And you don't really have any answers. I would love, as an educator, and I would hope that our teachers in Branford would love to be able to lay down at night and say, I know exactly what I would do. I think it would give parents, children, and of course, those teachers that comfort level that they would know what to do. Again, thinking proactively, I don't have any idea of the cost of this, but if it meant spending money, I think that's something that would be very wise money spent.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you. Very well said. Any other questions or comments on the superintendent's education budget? We'll deal with that first and then the capital budget after that. If not, do we have a recommendation, or I should say a motion to recommend to the full board adoption of the superintendent's budget for $56,888,000 and $56,888,223 to the full board?
Well, I think that maybe after we have a more discussion about what you brought up, what I just brought up, and then go from there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I'm ready to approve a budget now after there still needs to be more discussion.
Yeah.
Maybe the central office needs to go back and have discussions about what we just discussed.
Yeah. My item is a no-cost item.
Okay.
They would
Mine is
balance,
definitely a cost
balance
But it might
it
not
out.
be a huge, like I said, I don't know how much it would cost, so it might be something that there's monies available for, so,
Yep.
okay, I'll do whatever.
Hamlet mentioned that we We're looking into having a security analysis, and part of that conversation was that I've had with one of the firms, BOMAC is the name of the firm, was training for staff, and it was $200 a person. And that was for a one-day training.
Wow. Yeah.
Just to give you some indication, I mean, how much it is.
There might be grants available for something like that, though.
Or maybe, as you mentioned, we could get some help from our local police and fire departments. and-
Yeah, I mean, that's not the only route. I'm sure
Yeah,
there's
it's not
other
the only
options.
way we could go on
But
this.
that was the one
Right.
option that
Yeah.
I'm familiar
Right.
with.
Right.
I think
Okay,
we
what's
might-
the will of the board? Do you want to make a recommendation for next Wednesday's meeting to the full board on this budget, or do you want to postpone it and just let the full board vote on it next week as they wish?
So your proposal, John, that you were discussing,
No, I'm asking for a motion. Oh, the proposal that I mentioned?
right, the proposal that you mentioned,
That's a no-cost item
right,
because
so
the
that would be,
savings
that
would
would be
balance
budget
out.
neutral,
Yeah,
It's a
budget
neutral.
so it would not
Yeah, we're not,
impact.
right. So,
I'll make a motion to
to adopt the $56
adopt
million.
the 56
Okay.
million,
Okay.
888.
And recommend that to the full board.
Yep.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Now we move on to the final item on the agenda, and that's the capital budget.
It's, this is where Mr. Carbone, Mr. Carbone, why don't you come up? And, don't be shy, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
The board, they're a very nice group.
No, they are.
We're really,
What's that?
we're really not.
Well, kindness is an important factor. We try to model that for our children. So what we have here is the 5-year capital. Just historically, the 5-year capital plan, we have emphasized and we've focused on the following year. We use year 2 through 5 to really signal not only to the board, but also to the Board of Finance and the RTM, things that we are considering and contemplating as we maintain our facilities. Mr. Carbone and Mr. Neal, as well as Donna, they have worked very, very diligently to put this together. We also meet with Jim Finch. There's essentially 3 mechanisms and funding mechanisms for our capital, and they are capital dollars that the town allocates. There's debt service. In other words, the town would borrow dollars to fund the project. Then there is also a repurposing or reallocation of projects that we have essentially completed, and then through the board reallocating or repurposing those funds, that commences a process by which we then go to the RTM and go through Ways and Means, the Education Committee if appropriate, and then ultimately to the full RTM so that we have dollars moved from one bucket into another. So that's essentially the 3 funding streams. I mention that because it's important when you look at in your binder, and then we'll start with page C1. And Don, if you can kind of walk us through, you and Joe, in year 18-19, and we can start there. That's typically what we have, and then if there's questions around year 2 and 5, certainly we can entertain those. But in the immediate, we want to focus on the first year. So with that, I turn it over to Don.
Sure, and these are also detailed in pages 44 through 46. But the first big one, the $259,000, is for technology and AV systems, including Chromebooks, iPads for the elementary schools, some LCD projector upgrades, 2 computer labs at Branford High School, Chromebook carts, and again, additional Chromebooks. So those are on cycle for this year. There's a provision in there for office computers, which we kind of put in every year for administrators' laptops and those sorts of things that are due to be replaced through their life cycle. The next item is equipment, and that's one of Joe's pieces, and it's grounds equipment.
Yeah, the equipment, $15,000 for grounds equipment. We're looking to replace some older grounds equipment that we have. We currently have 2 individuals that do all the grounds work for us, for the town, for the Board of Ed. Approximately 37 acres, something like that, that they take care of. So, equipment, it gets old. This piece of equipment particularly is almost 11 years old, so it's time to...
Are we talking about lawnmowers or?
Lawnmowers, yes, this one here, yeah.
Okay.
So that's it for the equipment and services section. Then we move into buildings. Branford High School, $30,000. The detailed description says boys' locker rooms. We're not certain which would be the priority or how that would be phased because, 300,000. Both sets of locker rooms are in need of serious upgrades. So that's an important thing that we've been actually anticipating for several years. Then to system-wide boiler replacements. That again, that's a cyclical project that we anticipate. I don't know if you have any additional
No, we're looking. We have basically 3 of our buildings actually here at the high school, Indian Neck and Sliney School, that the boilers are fairly old. So we did Murphy and Tisco within the past 4 years to replace them for energy efficiency. Unfortunately, part of that big energy audit that we just did, that did not include that in there. So we still need to fund these items to continue on down the road to improve our heating systems.
Okay.
And then there's $15,000 for roofing repairs, which we have in every year. These are kind of recurring types of repairs that we have throughout the district. That's always been in our capital budget. Moving towards external facilities, we have softball field, dugouts, and press box at the high school. It's pretty much self-explanatory. The tennis courts for $252,000. That's a big project, and we would anticipate that the town would fund that with some sort of debt. And then we have a need to upgrade our storage capacity here at the fields. We're using trailers, which for a variety of reasons are not the ideal environment in which to store our equipment. And then if we're going to add on to a complex, then it seems like the right opportunity to also expand our lavatory facilities for people who are attending events here. So this $15,000 would be just to produce a study and basic architectural plans, schematics.
Okay. Thank you. Questions, comments on the budget? The total capital budget is what?
$968,120.
Mm-hmm.
And that's comprised of, the total amount for 18-19 is $968,120. $416,000 is from the general fund. $271,000 is from debt, bonds, notes, and the 208, and then the balance of 281,000 would be from redesignated capital, and that's and we work with Mr. Finch, so this is not done in a vacuum. This is done very close in close coordination with the town finance director.
John?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the clarity of this. I think it really does us a lot of good vis-à-vis the town who pays our capital expenses when they can see 5 years out. So that gives them an opportunity to have predictability and build it into whatever they're doing down the road. And I also think that we've been pretty modest in terms of really waiting until the need is great. And to congratulate you, Joe, and your guys for maintaining our facilities as well as you do. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Other comments? Maria?
So for clarity on the locker rooms, for next year, the request is for the boys' locker room?
Half the locker room.
Yeah,
Because that's what it says.
Yeah, that's what the detail says. That is yet to be determined. The boys' locker room, the boys' locker room is in a state of more significant disrepair. And I would say this publicly, that I do believe that we should contemplate doing the girls' locker room first, even though the boys is a little bit more in disrepair. And the reason I say that is it would give us an opportunity to see what those costs are, as well as then we can go into an area that is a little bit more damaged. And if there's any residuals from that, we can put that there. I would not want to really shortchange the girls' locker room. I would rather start with the girls, get that area squared away, and then any residuals from that portion of the project to be allocated for the boys. And I did want to make a comment on the $30,000 this year for the press box. That is for the girls' softball field. We do have some significant, I think, exposure if we don't do things from a Title IX perspective, and I do think from an equity perspective. I'm sure I won't be very popular with the boys' athletic teams when I walk through the high school, but I think sometimes we need to be mindful of, who's going first and who gets to go second. So I do think there's some value in that.
So the 300,000 would be for one of the locker rooms, 18, 19, and then is the idea that the other one would be up for renovation in 22,
Right.
23?
Very similar, Marie, to what we did with the dugout and the press box.
Yep. Okay.
So if the money is put in place this year, we would not act on the project this summer. We would act on the project next summer, so that it's 2 years and we bridge 2 years of funding. Very similar to the model that we did with the girls' softball press box.
And if I just may, one other question that I
Sure.
just have. So on page 44, with some of the detailed information on the 21st century technology, is there a difference in the charging carts, where it says included in the request, it says for Branford High School grades 9 and 10. So the carts there are $1,500 each. And then down, up towards the bottom, 10 district Chromebook carts to replace those no longer charge. Those seem to be coming in at $1,200 each.
So it might be dependent on the size of the cart and the number of Chromebooks needed for a high school class, which might be larger than elementary.
Okay. So they're not, there could be difference. Okay.
Negotiate the best prices, so even within that, sometime if you buy a volume again, get another discount.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Questions from the audience? Yes, come forward.
I just want to know what the 15K study was. I didn't catch that.
15K study.
That was for the architectural study for to place a storage area, Robin, on the athletic complex here at the high school, as well as lavatory facilities for spectators. That's ADA compliant.
But this is for a study only, it's not
Yeah, that's only
actually
for the study.
for
That's
the
just-
study.
Um,
Other questions? If not, are we ready to make a recommendation to the full board on the capital budget? Someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the $968,120 for the 2018-19 year, and then Do we
Okay.
have to make a motion for the 5-year as
No.
well?
No,
Okay.
just that 1 year. Is there a second to the motion?
This is a motion to move it to the full board.
Yes, this is a motion to, this is not to approve it, this is to move it to the full board next Wednesday for their vote. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There was a question, we're open for discussion right now? Yeah. You made it.
It's green. I'm Robin Comey, and I'm also an RTM rep and on the Education Committee. And I just wanted to note, wanted to say in support of the tennis courts. I have received some concerns from some of the public, some of the constituents in town, and they're very concerned about the shape of the tennis courts and that they thought it was dangerous. And so I'm glad to see that it's included in Joe's budget.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Robin.
Yep. Other comments before we vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Very good. If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
You were right.
Jumping the gun there, Joanne.
Should have.